In this session, we'll be completing the steps necessary to configure an authorization policy for our wired policy set. In the previous session, we created components for those authorization rules, in particular the DACLs that we applied within authorization profiles for our wired contractor, wired employees, and wired domain computers. Now let's take a look at what we've got for authorization policy in place currently within the wired policy set. So I've selected policy sets and we'll expand into that. And recall that we have authentication policy already created, and now we're focusing on authorization policy. And currently in place, the only thing in existence is a default authorization rule, which upon matching those with no other conditions to match will be denying access to whatever endpoints are attempting to utilize this. So check that out from the perspective of our wired switch and mimic a client authentication from the perspective of our network access device. And here we're implying the employee or user credentials and the password. And with the iOS switch, because we're working with AAA new model to develop out local policy on that iOS switch, we're specifying new code to create that authentication match, and we quickly get a user rejected with that. Alright, so let's develop out authorization policy and correct that. So back on ISE, let's add a new authorization rule. And this first one we'll create will be for our wired employees. And we'll use the Condition Studio and take advantage of our Active Directory integration and the groups that we imported when we did the Active Directory integration with the join point. We can select those attributes here. So in the pre-existing attributes, we'll want identity group, and we can see that demo.local has been added to this list and referencing external groups as an attribute. And then the group that we're wanting to match in this case is employees, and again these groups are showing up as a result of that import operation that was done with the join point. And again, we can save this if we desire to add it to the library, and we can drag and drop this as a selection in the future. We'll use this so it applies to our rule, and we can see the full rule listed out. And then we'll select the authorization profile that we created to support employee access. Notice in addition to an authorization profile, we could also select a TrustSec security group, and this is an either or and or situation. It could be a security group or an authorization profile or both. Okay, let's add another rule immediately above this one before we save the policy set and add one for our contract users. Select the contractors from our demo.local domain. And again, if particular groups are not showing up on that list, we can always rerun the import operation at the join point and add those newly created Active Directory groups. And add one for our domain computers. Again, for matching concepts, quite a bit of flexibility for components or objects that can be matched from within the Active Directory realm. And making that easy is, of course, these pre-built OUs that Active Directory places in there, and we get to take advantage of that. Need to make sure and add the authorization profile. So we've got the one for contractors and the one for domain computers. Let's add a couple more rules for example. In this case, some of these are rules that are provided as examples within the default policy set, and here we're getting a little tour of some of the other conditions that we can match against. In this case, we'll take advantage of a pre-built library object. If we hover over the internals of that, it's looking for a logical profile which is a concept that is developed out with the profiler. And we create a logical profile. This one is created by Cisco, of course. And as objects, endpoints, MAC addresses are discovered to be a non-Cisco phone, they'll be added to this IP phone's logical profile. And in this case, we'll make sure that we apply a specific policy to support that. And in this case, Cisco has provided a authorization profile to support non-Cisco IP phone access. And then in a similar fashion, we'll use the Condition Studio and select another variation on identity matching for policy component matching. And then in this case, along with logical profiles, we also have identity groups, and these again are internal concepts. Both internal users and internal endpoints are added to these groups, and we're looking for a specific one for Cisco phones. And so again, same process with Profiler, that Cisco IP phones will be added to this endpoint identity group, and we'll provide policy to support those here. Okay, we'll save this policy set, and this will apply. We can see the newly added rules with the pencil icon, and know that we're going to be saving those rules. And it does an overall syntax check, make sure we're not missing any pieces, and in this case we're all completely successful. And looking at our authorization policy, we can see the names, the conditions that we're matching with, and the authorization profile or results that will be applied when these rules are matched. Again, the rule processing is hierarchical, so it will start at the top and work our way down towards the bottom, and ultimately what we're trying to avoid is matching this default rule. We're trying to put conditions in place such that we're providing some sort of access. The labels are fairly important with respect to troubleshooting, that when we go around and look in the live log, these labels will be utilized. Okay, as a final test here, let's go back and retry from our access switch. And in this case, we get success, and we can see that as part of that authorization, if it had actually been a user endpoint session that applied our ACL employee DACL to that authorization, and this is what it would receive from ISE as a Radius server. All right, that completes our wired policy set authorization rules, and we're ready to move forward with wireless in our next session.